Hello, and welcome back to another presentation from Straight Talk about PTSD. This presentation will be about the optimal self versus the post-traumatic self. The optimal self is the person you either are or would have become if raised in a healthy enough environment by healthy enough people who treated you with love and respect, who met your necessary needs with affection, timeliness, and competence. Parents who were supportive, available, and consistent. The optimal self is a realistic, balanced version of the idea of being the best human being you can be. Lest someone think that I'm trying to say that one should never provide appropriately critical or negative feedback to a child, or that parents should do everything for a child even once the child could adequately do things for themselves with minimal guidance or help, let me make it clear that I'm saying nothing of the sort. In fact, at some point in toddlerhood, children appear to need age-appropriate, situation-appropriate, and healthy criticism, socializing feedback, and encouragement to do and to make the most out of their abilities. In fact, the overindulged, pampered, and relentlessly and unconditionally affirmed child has a surprisingly good chance of becoming a person without social sensitivity, or a child who later acts out and seeks out limits and feedback from school or society. After all, a person or a situation with no boundaries, no rules, no limits, that's a situation where just about anything can happen and often does. No limits, no rules, no boundaries, no constructive criticism, no healthy adult willing to be in charge. That equals no external or internal sense of security. At the Women's Federal Prison, where I worked for 15 plus years, in our trauma recovery program, we generally maintained a small but still surprising number of highly indulged children from socioeconomically upper middle and upper class homes. Children past infancy increasingly need appropriate feedback, not unconditional or relentlessly positive or unconditional and relentlessly negative feedback. Praise when they try hard or do right and well, sure, but also appropriate constructive criticism and consequences when they don't try or when they do intentionally wrong and significantly below their potential. In the book of my clinical experience, it is the age appropriateness and situation appropriateness, that is conditional feedback, which provides feedback as optimal value. Unconditional feedback, that means always negative or always positive regardless, of what the child did or didn't do. It's confusing and it has little quality information and teaching value. The child simply must experience a real and appropriate connection between what they do and what happens for learning to take place. No consequences, no experienced connection between what they did and how it turned out means no learning. Also, some level of frustration, along with fulfillment, is also often necessary to motivate a child to practice and develop their age-appropriate abilities. If they don't even have to try to contribute to their own fulfillment or their own success, or they get the same praise or criticism whether they try or not, if you do everything for them without asking anything age-appropriate of them, they'll never learn how to appropriately self-care and will often expect others to keep doing it for them. Now, the mirroring and experience provided by a healthy enough home and healthy enough parents allows a child to develop a fundamentally accurate and positive picture of themselves, their worth, and their abilities. They really do know and they appreciate who they truly are. This kind of mirroring also utilizes social reinforcement and appropriate praise such that others will matter to the child in a positive way and be later viewed as worthy and good as well. The securely attached optimal self is likely to develop under these conditions. Now, the optimal self, being securely attached, tends towards stable, healthy, and mutually fulfilling relationships, a strong sense of prosocial values, a preference for win-win situations, and respect both for themselves and for others. Optimal selves seek appropriate intimacy and they thrive on it. The optimal selves also know themselves well and accurately, and they are therefore able to know and to fulfill their own, and by extension, relationship partners' legitimate needs in a healthy, cooperative, moderate, and respectful fashion. Optimal selves also tend to live balanced lives and can enjoy both solitude and togetherness. The mirroring and experience provided by an unstable, violent, and chaotic environment and an unresponsive, self-involved, or drug-addled parent basically simulates the love-starved, needy, and overwhelmed child to develop a fundamentally negative picture of life and of their own being, worth, and abilities. Others may be experienced as necessary or even as useful objects, but are generally not experienced as benign or inherently desirable. In such circumstances, starved needs and negative emotions dominate. Life is traumatic, hyperarousal and hypofrontality develop, and the optimal self rarely stands a chance of becoming real. Instead, attachment trauma and other trauma beget a trauma-dominated map of life and an insecurely attached post-traumatic self. Now, this post-traumatic self is simply the person you had to become to get what you could of what you needed from where and with whom you were stuck. Although this post-traumatic self functions in a very real way and is often loudly and rigidly defended and declared to be their true self, the post-traumatic self is essentially a trauma-adapted, trauma-corrupted, contrived, that is, made-up self-image rather than a truer, more optimal self. Post-traumatic selves tend to be dominated by negative emotions and powerful unmet needs, which experience has not taught them how to deal with in an appropriate, balanced, cooperative fashion. The post-traumatic self tends towards shifting, low-intimacy alliances instead of healthier and more enduring intimate relationships. The post-traumatic self often cannot tolerate aloneness, but even has more difficulty tolerating intimacy. The post-traumatic self is often either overly submissive, overly manipulative, or overly competitive, domineering, and aggressive. The post-traumatic self, being insecurely attached at its core, sees relationships and interactions with others as win versus lose. Someone wins, someone loses. The post-traumatic self, given the chaotic and painfully negative underlying sense of self, generally possesses a rather deficient, inaccurate sense of who they are and no idea of who they could have been. That is, had experience been more benign. The post-traumatic self generally feels painfully alone in a hostile universe and frequently turns to dominant or submissive relationship melodrama, drugs, high-stim distraction activities, and food and sexual addictions because all of these have in common that they change the way the post-traumatic self would otherwise naturally feel as a result of their living memories of life experience. As always, I hope that you found this straight talk about PTSD presentation accurate and illuminating. If you'd like to subscribe, just hit the subscribe button below. If you'd like to be notified of future straight talk about PTSD presentations as they are uploaded, please hit the bell icon as well. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join us again for the next presentation, which will explore the idea that insecure attachment and post-traumatic stress disorder basically almost never travel alone. Again, as always, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time.